He's going to explore the technical and creative aspects of multi-channel location audio recording for the giant screen, discussing and answering questions about the tools used and some tricks of the trade. Also discussing the similarities and differences between location audio recording for the giant screen or recording for feature films and television. Okay, so before we get too deeply into that, the essence of this whole thing is that there's a whole toolkit that's involved in the audio world, and audio is one of those parts of the experience that either tends to be neglected by young filmmakers. I taught at Webster University for 7 years, and the video projects that I got in for my students were interesting visually, and the audio was the last part that really needed some work, and it's just one of the natural things we do. We just take audio for granted. It's just supposed to happen. But there's a lot of work into making it just supposed to happen. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. So let's just talk about, Tim, real quick, the main difference between recording on location for giant screen films or for feature films or TV. Is there anything different, or is it all just the same?
So yeah, just to go just a real quick sort of summary on location audio. Location audio for television for feature films is 99% dependent on recording and getting dialogue. And I mean, the dialogue is the story, and that's why they're there. So a sound recordist that's on location for feature films is usually sitting there with a cart, and he's usually got microphones on all the actors, and dialogue is the most important thing. When we're out recording location for giant screen films, as Cory mentioned today, we're in an immersive environment. We're not out there just to get exactly what the camera is seeing, but we want to be able to get the atmospheres, we want to be able to get the animals, we want to be able to get anything that's indigenous to that area is important for us. Because when we bring it back into the studio, it's got to be there. So if it's not there and we're collecting it from the field, then we have to fake it later. And why do that? It's almost as if we say, well, then don't go out and shoot, just use stock footage, right? It's the same thing. We use stock audio. So if we can get out there, and during production is great. Even go to the location before production or after production. Any time that we can pick up, indigenous atmospheres and things from the environment is great. And even if it's just guide track, even if it's just something that we can say, oh, that's what it feels like and sounds like to be there, at least it gives us a chance to build the track after the fact. And then to take it one step further, make it as immersive as we can. Multiple microphones, multiple recorders with multiple microphones, placing them in different places, just to create this atmosphere out on location while we're recording.
And Tim, isn't part of it the authenticity of the soundscape? Because we've all experienced those things where somebody said, oh, well, I heard a bird that would never appear in that environment, or why is there a cricket chirping there? There would be no indigenous crickets in this.
That actually happened to us in one of our films, and the client showed up the next day and threw crickets all over the console and said, "There's no crickets in Scotland." Anyway, it's true story. It's true. I mean, you guys are out there. The filmmakers are out there. Recording fact. I mean, this is what the place looks like. This is what the place should sound like. We do a lot of research, or we'll say, in that area we would hear X bird, or we would hear these types of things. So a lot of it goes into the research as well. But we try and be as correct as and indigenous as we can.
So let me pitch that same question to Cory. Any other thoughts about location recording for giant screen?
No, I think Tim has obviously done a great deal of it, and he's got some very sophisticated rigs. For those of you who haven't seen them, he's the guy. I would just reiterate what I said in my remarks, that you will be impressed when you go out and record in multi-channel spread. Most camera crews, if we're lucky, you get a mono or a stereo mic, maybe a quad. If you go out and record in multi-channel, then you will be happy later. Brian?
I totally agree with everything that's been said. I think that when you go out and shoot your locations, and you're on the streets of Cuba, or you're in the jungles of Borneo or something, there's an energy that you're capturing with your camera. And that energy can be translated by capturing the sound from that time. We all have massive libraries that we've accumulated over the years, some of them for past shows, some of them, digitally remastered by other sound groups. But, to capture the energy you felt at that time you were there shooting, goes a lot to tell your story. And when your audience can experience what you're experiencing, I think everybody just gets fully immersed in your story and fully immersed in your location. And you achieve what you're meant to achieve in producing your film, which is to take people to this spot and introduce them to this location. So by capturing location at that time, feeling the energy of the people, the energy of the forest, the jungle, the different sounds that are native, that are alien to maybe people in North America, or they've never been to that location. I think it's a shame not to capture it.
Okay, so here's an interesting thought as well. Now, the sound department usually has one of the biggest challenges in that most of their work doesn't really start in earnest until the picture is locked. There's some stuff that happens, we're going to talk about that in a second, but there's a very narrow window in order to deliver the fantastic work that they have to do. So, Brian, we'll go back to you. If when you're planning a project, how early do you start thinking about picking sounds or doing the sound design work? Is it when you're sitting in the studio and somebody brings in a finished cut and they're ready for you, or what happens?
Yeah, no, for me it starts with the initial conversation at one of these conferences or later on the phone, when they say, hey, we're thinking of doing this film in this spot, I'd like to bring you on board or whatever. As early as the process as you can bring the sound designer in is going to do nothing but benefit your project. Because like we all talked about, it all depends on location sound effects, and that has to happen when you go out initially to shoot. So you talk to your sound designer, and you sort of start to understand what kind of things you would be looking for, maybe some concepts on how to capture that. Maybe you're going on a shoot where you have a really minimal crew. You don't want to grab a whole bunch of extra microphones, a bunch of extra kit. How can you compensate for that? What other solutions are out there so that you can actually bring something back that can be part of that location library, sound effects library, or just sound in general, that you can start to build on. And then, so those effects will come in early on in the shoot. As the shoot starts to happen, you feed the sound department, you clean them up, they sort of catalog what they have. Then they may go out and say, if you're going to go back in your pickups or something, can you grab a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that? And then what happens is, by the time you get to lock picture, the shape and the arc is already started, and it evolves with the picture. So as you sit with your editors and you start to take your footage and bring it all together into the story that you're going to tell, your sound is happening at that time as well. And everybody's worried about, if I bring you on early, how much is that going to cost? It's going to cost me so much more money because you're going to be working for 8 months more or 18 months more, and it doesn't. If we have a conversation and you say, we're going to be mixing this for a release in 2017, and you come to me today and say, can you help me out with this film? The budget's the budget as far as I'm concerned, because it's all part of what goes into creating a soundtrack for these types of films. So there's really no excuse not to do it, and I think in the end it becomes just a better experience for the audience, and it becomes a better film for everybody.
Cory and Tim, anything to add?
No, I totally agree. I mean, you can bring your sound designer on a year before, for example, you're releasing, or you can bring them on 4 weeks before you're releasing. It's going to cost you the same amount of money, but literally you're going to get a better product if we've got the time, right? I would say better, cheaper, faster. Pick two, right? And the bottom line is that with the amount of time that we can spend, right, it's going to be a better product. It's all there is to it.
Can you talk a bit about just get a little bit more on the practicality from a cost, personnel, and gear point of view for maximizing the location sound that you bring back?
Well, I would say, depending on the shoot, depending on where you're going, what we used to get when the cameras were so noisy, we used to get either no audio or we would get minimal guide track. I think now that the cameras are obviously not as noisy, or if you're recording digital, there really is no excuse not to at least get guide track, even if you're getting guide track, just into the camera, something to give us sort of a running start. But it's going to depend on the sound recorders that you bring. Bringing a seasoned feature film sound recorders with kit, with cart, with the whole 9 yards, may not be the best for crawling through a jungle. And so really there's completely different sort of viewpoints on what, who goes at, whether it's a feature film recorders or whether it's, a documentary recorders. A lot of the documentary guys will come with, a smaller kit, but they know that they're not there just to record dialogue. They know that they're actually there to record everything else.
It's interesting because on Fun Butterfly, the most powerful sound we had in film was when the film goes completely silent and all you hear is the sound of butterfly leaves flapping. That
Absolutely.
sound was location sound from the behind the scenes shooting with the little video camera.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
That's how we captured the most powerful sound in film.
Yeah.
And that's why you sort of,
That's why you sort of talk to your sound team ahead of time and figure out what is it you're trying to accomplish. Because you can take a little H2N, which I've been sort of showing around at the trade show yesterday and a few other spots, and it's a 4-channel recorder that is good for just picking up those spur of the moment sound effects. So your crew's gone off to eat, everybody's kind of taking a break, and you've got time. You pull this little recorder, it's about the size of a wallet, cell phone out of your pocket. Oh, here's one right here. Right? And you sit it on a tree stump and walk away for 10 minutes. And you come back and you've got a high resolution recording that's at 48K 24-bit that is more than adequate to use as a base or on its own in your soundtrack. And these devices, I think all in with an accessory kit is like $200, right? But for things like sync dialogue, you may want to go with a more pronounced kit, a more seasoned sound guy who knows how to capture dialogue and do it properly. But for things like the butterfly sounds, where it's just you want to create a library of that to give to your sound design department and have them build it up, these recordings are more than adequate to start with that. So it depends on if you're going out to do sort of big camera stuff or maybe second unit stuff or scouting. You're going to do a scout and you just want to create. You want to come back with some sounds that you can say, hey, I was in that butterfly sanctuary and I got some of this. What do you think? And then your sound department can be like, that stuff's great. You can get more of it, or put the mic a little closer, or that kind of stuff. It goes a long way, and that doesn't involve bringing out a sound team. Just a little conversation with your sound department and get some usable stuff.
really almost like you want to create a shot list.
Exactly. And sometimes you don't know what your shot list is going to look like until you've had initial pre-production discussions. Maybe you've seen some test footage that was shot on low resolution cameras or something like that. So that's more and more reason to bring everybody in early.
My 2 cents on Jonathan's question is we all know of the happy accidents that happened on set. The butterfly capture, and I know the shot you're talking about, Jonathan, is a happy accident. It's beautiful, it's lovely and fantastic, and very fortunate to have captured it. But you can imagine how it may have turned out if you had a dedicated guy, a recordist there on the day with a full surround kit to capture that. It probably would have been even better. And I think, Christian's point is quite relevant. It all comes down to pre-production planning. And I think you can skin it one of 2 ways. You make a hit list in pre-production of the ambiences and the special sounds you want for your sound designer and your mix team. And you dedicate X amount of your days and hence budget to hiring someone to do that. And that's all they're going to do. They're going to come and go. And that's a line item on your budget. It doesn't take up the time of your main recordist who's going to travel with you from location to location, although they can often capture things. Their main focus is not that shot list. They've got to stay with the camera and stay with the crew. So I think if you plan it from the get-go, you can probably make it pretty cost-effective to do something spectacular in Whistler or surrounding.
So I want to key in on something that Cory said in his presentation earlier about recording in the surround field and the logistics of that versus just recording elements and then doing a multi-track recreation of it later. So can you guys speak to that a little bit of how you would actually set something up to record for the spatial immersive audio versus doing it sort of the traditional way, and what the benefits and all that?
You know, Cory's mentioned that a little bit already by, you know, you can walk out with a 12-channel emulating this room into your environment, and when that's practical, then yeah, it's going to sound fantastic. When it becomes a little impractical, we go with sort of what Brian was talking about with the little H2Ns. The way I would approach, say, an atmospheric type of, you know, surround environment where I, you know, can't bring a bunch of microphones, is I may have, you know, 2 or 3 of the little H2Ns, for example, and plant them in different areas. Okay, so now, knowing full well that each one of them is recording 4-track, I may say, okay, well, this one's going to cover that quadrant, this one's going to cover that quadrant, and sort of, you know, break the theater up into quadrants when you look at the scene that you're recording. Then going in with you know, mono microphones or stereo microphones, but high-end microphones to pick up your specifics. It's not unlike, you know, shooting a wide shot, going in for your medium shot, going in for your close-ups. So when you bring it all back into the mix theater, you have your what I call glue track, which is your environment, and anything that you stick in that environment that you've recorded there with, you know, the animals or the footsteps or the dialogue or anything that is in that environment, you recorded it at high quality with your mono microphone and your recorder, you can set inside that environment. Again, whereas in a feature film, you're not as concerned with that. You're concerned with picking up dialogue only and then sort of wrapping it around when you do sound design and mix.
Just to sort of carry on with that, yeah, one of the great things you get by recording multi-channel out on location is you get the natural spatialization of that space. And I think the film symposium last year, I showed there was some clip playing from a film called Tiger, which was shot in India and Bangladesh. And the associate producer took out an H2N and gathered all these locations from all these different forests and places that they shot in. And in one of the scenes, they're in a forest and there are tigers around, and the deers are setting off alarms, because that's how they sort of warn each other that there's danger around. So the deer call is sort of like a loud, sharp chuff, like that. Probably better than that.
Do that again.
Something like that. But what was cool about it was that where the H2N was, the front of it was gathering the present sound, but the two capsules in the back of it captured the natural reverb of that chuff bouncing off the trees in the forest. And although in a pre-dub situation, we can take a mono, clean recorded sound like that, and we can add delay, we can add some spatialization to it. I tell you, nothing beats the natural acoustics of that forest at that time with that sound effect. So we have a lot of tools in our tool chest that we can create spatialization and make the scene and the shot sound as big as it looks. We've done it with great success for many years. But in the advent of these recorders, these multi-channel recorders, the natural acoustics of that space, that time, is really hard to reproduce. And it does send chills up your spine.
Are you advocating an extra person?
I personally think you got to fit it into your production budget. I think it's great to have an extra person to be in charge of gathering the sound effects, but also at the same time understand restrictions of budget and personnel and time and everything that everybody's going through. What I say as a sort of a second to that is talk to your sound department, understand the technology, understand how to work it, what we're trying to do with it. Train somebody, whether it's a PA, whether it's an associate producer, whether it's somebody on your crew that could have that opportunity to get that for you, and then bring them into your sound department. They'll get walk through what we're looking for, how to use it, what to watch out for to make sure that we get the best possible recordings we can, and just let them know that that's their responsibility. So either way has worked for me on different productions. I've had people go out that this is your sound guy, he's there to gather this for you, and I've had to train members of the crew that do other jobs to say, please do this and play with the gear here. So
just be ready for it to be the most incompetent person which you might be.
See, this is just sort of jumping off that. It goes back to when to get your sound designer involved, and I think the bottom line is that if you say that you're going out in this, unique location, the sound designer is going to do his research and say, well, here's where I think you need to get. But we also have to remember that a microphone is the same as a lens. You can take a really nice picture and a really nice snapshot, or you can take a photograph. I mean, you do kind of have to know where the microphone's pointing. It's not just as simple as setting up. It does give us a guide track. It gives us something to work with, something to build around. But if your sound design team is on early and they're talking to the person that you're bringing out who is actually recording audio, then I think it's going to be a lot easier for us to say, okay, Mr. Person who or Mrs. Person who's recording audio, here's what we're looking for atmospheres. And I know that they're going to say, well, I don't have time to do that. That's always the big one because, everybody's rushing around to the next set. But a lot of the times it's like, well, guess what? Go out, half an hour before the crew, or stay a half hour later and pick up these what we call wild tracks, guide tracks, wild tracks. Pick up that stuff in the way that sort of we've told them and instructed them on how to do it, and I think you'll get a great result.
But I think Jonathan's stumbled on the perfect model because it's something I used to do. Because if you have a making of videographer, that person will be training.
Yeah, but I've dealt with that before, and a lot of them don't want to be bothered because they say, well, I might miss what I'm here to do. But if they're instructed to do that as well, then yeah.
I've been there a lot. I would never say that.
Okay.
Yeah, you really can do it.
In just addressing the question, do we hire another person? I think it comes down to how important is that sound to you? How important is the environment, capturing the environment to your movie? For example, when we shot NASCAR, there was a dedicated crew just to pick up cars. And they were on board the cars, very difficult situation, big rig. They were hired exclusively to do that for obvious reasons. When Stephen Lowe shot Rocky Mountain Express, same deal. He had Thierry go out, and all that he did was record trains. So he had PCMs and all kinds of microphones all over those steam trains because it was important to the movie. So if you're doing a film about elephants or about tigers and you want authentic sound, I think it's really worthwhile to prioritize those shots from a picture and sound point of view, and that's when it becomes worthwhile to hire somebody specifically for that. If it's incidental atmospheres and backgrounds, I think Brian and Tim make a good point that you can have the sound assistant do it or another assistant on the crew do it. Give them some training, bring it to your sound team early, but save the money. It depends on how important the sound is to them.
It depends on the script and the genre. If there's not a lot of people talking on screen, then really your sound department is there to get indigenous animals or indigenous atmospheres and on and on. I think what we're all saying is that bring a sound guy, right? Now, whether or not it's bringing an extra one, is going to depend on your story and your script. But there's no reason why, I don't think there's a reason why you would go to this, a beautiful place that sounds like nothing on earth and not have someone actually record professionally.
And just one thing to add with this, as far as sort of making sure that the sound department knows where you were and what you were doing at the time that you captured that sound. Voice slates work great. So just a simple, I'm sitting here in a forest, in this forest on this day at this time of day. And
Take
it
a
goes a
little
long
video
way to
or
help cataloging. Because all that stuff will come back to the sound department, and then we'll catalog it all, and we'll mark it all up so that we can start.
Yeah, often I'll take just a little snapshot or a little video of where I am and just and talk on that because it helps catalog where you are. You had a question on top.
Do you guys ever capture like an impulse response at a specific location? Or is that?
Should we capture impulse responses? It would depend on what the subject matter was of the film. If we're doing a musical piece in a concert hall, we might go that route. But
Definitely
for the
interiors.
most part, for the most part, I would say.
Yeah, well, definitely large interiors, large. That's one. Not so much in the exterior stuff. Yes.
We're shooting a lot for VR. Any advice or
For the acquisition of sound for VR.
well, yeah, we have like a 14 cameras
Right.
Make sure spatially.
When you set up the 14 camera system, is it on a sound stage or something?
It's in the wild.
It's in the wild field, right? That would be, if you're going to set up a 14 camera system, that would sort of talk more to what Cory was talking about. I would actually go out and set up a microarray that would capture that at the same time.
Yeah, the other way to talk about VR is, VR are glasses like this, and normally 9 times out of 10, it's also headphones, right? So if we're talking headphones, then we go back into the whole binaural thing, which is, if you capture it properly binaurally, you're going to get great 3D audio, but that's sort of, I think, on a different forum here. Any question?
A suggestion and a question about capturing those immersive soundscapes. I've done some research working at Technicolor on the audio side. The best time to capture those immersive soundscapes are jungles and places like that, which is scouting, because there's no crew, it's not disruptive nature, that it's more natural and safe. It's much easier to capture those kind of immersive soundscapes.
I totally agree. I mean, just, on the last documentary series I did, I was actually part of the scouting, and I picked up most of my stuff, or a lot of my stuff, during the scouting for that reason. Now, the thing is that we'd go out and scout, and they'd say, well, we're not actually going to go back there, but I didn't lose anything by recording it.
And the other question is, what is your philosophy when we have replication successive images on the screen and have different points of view and you visualize the sound, but every 2 seconds you change the camera's angle? What is your philosophy sound-wise with that?
There are no rules. In some cases, you're going to want to cut 2 frames of sound or a 2-frame shot. Hopefully not this medium, but
Or about visualization of sound, because all of a sudden we take time here and then time there.
We have mixed films where the sound moves with the camera precisely, and we have mixed sequences like that where it's based by music and you back off and the music's taken. It really depends on the content. There are no rules, which is sort of the joy of this business. You give it what you think it needs. And further to your earlier question, it's not entirely rocket science regarding capturing for VR or for film, television, etc. If you're in an immersive format and you have some semblance of the notion of what you're going to play back or what your playback or exhibition medium is, take as many microphones as that system will produce. And with a little bit of common sense and correctionality, as Brian and Tim said, it's all about what we call early reflections. And early reflections, the capture of real sound, is extremely difficult to recreate. You can come close, but you just can't quite. That's why directors are in love with sync sound. They're absolutely in love. Let's drop the ADR. It's perfect because there's just something about the sync sound that I love. It's real. So if you're doing something in 12 channel, take 12 microphones. I'm serious. Or take pairs of 6 and use them, because you're going to get you can then manipulate that back on the stage in many umpteen ways and enrich the entire process. And another point about personnel on set, and the point you made about scouting. The best sound recorders are absolute pricks. They're the guys who are pushy, aggressive, and
they'll yell cut for you.
Demand that the director gives them time to silence the crew so he can capture some ambience. A good friend of mine specs of the Israeli Army best sound recorders. Daniel had a question.
I did. Yay, pricks. That didn't come out right. We talked a lot about ambience and building a sort of compelling sound landscape. I would like to ask you guys to comment on capturing the voice track, which, in my experience, is a bit of an afterthought as well. Where in the documentary world, we tend to work with non-actors, We bring them into the studio at the end. We're not getting good performances. They're reading written text, and so there are different approaches. We've seen a lot of that, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of our films suffer from that. I like the point that Pierre made about scouting. I mean, I'd like you to speak to this, and I'm getting to my question. What I have noticed is that if you bring a recorder in a relatively quiet environment and you record your cast before you start shooting, before they become overwhelmed by cameras and equipment, oftentimes you get wonderful stream of conscious, natural material that an audience recognizes as authentic as opposed to read off the page. And I'd like you guys to comment on the technology involved, or the personnel involved, or the thinking from a design perspective as to how to get the best performances.
Now, are you talking more sync dialogue on camera or voiceover?
Both.
Okay.
I think that, a recording studio can be incredibly intimidating for somebody who's not in the business as the subject of a film. So I can see why when you get them in and you put the headphones on in an isolated room, they feel intimidated and the performances come out a little stale. I think that doing a voice record, doing an interview, whatever on set is the most natural way to get the best sounding performance from any guest, whether it's meant to be in voiceover or meant to be on camera. The critical part of that, though, is to find obviously the most quiet zone place that you can go to, and there's a couple of tricks that you can use for that. In the past, we've used a car, right? Because there's so much, with the seats and all that. You can get a good position in a car. You can get, just finding a really quiet place because the mic will pick up everything, and you don't want to be. If you record them on the side of a boat while it's rocking in the waves, and you put it in your film and you're showing shots of jungles and that, everybody's like, where are the waves coming from? That's not supposed to be there. So, being conscious of even if they're on camera while they're talking, being aware of where you're putting them. Are they standing with a fairly generic background behind them? Maybe it's just some foliage or whatever, but you're standing right next to a highway. Well, let's put them in foliage that's away from the highway, right? Those kinds of things all have to be considered because obviously the cleanest location sound that you can get is obviously going to go a long way when it actually gets put into the track.
The other thing to remember, if you don't have to bring it back to the studio, I mean, you can be saving studio time, money, and cost of them flying into wherever you want to bring them. I've converted many hotel rooms to voiceover booths. Just take the mattresses off the beds and put them up against the wall, and you can get a pretty good result. If not, at least you're getting a good guide track for the editors to work with. But Brian's right. When it's something about having that person in that environment outside, it's going to sound like that person is where they are, and that should enhance, the story. When it comes to recording dialogue that's on screen, you still want to be able to multi-mic it. A really nice boom mic when you can get it in. Try and let the guy get the boom mic as close as you can, and relight sometimes if the shadows are in the way, as opposed to trying to get us to get something that's only half adequate, and put a wire on them. And sometimes the wire plus boom sounds better than just the wire or the boom. And sometimes the intimacy of the wire sounds better than the nature of the boom. So double miking, everything, and capture them in their indigenous environment as much as you possibly can. I told the story last year about Cowboy Mike, and Cowboy, Mike on Ride Around the World. Sounded great when he was on his horse with his hat on, but as soon as you got him into the studio with his three-piece suit on, because he's going to the big city, it sounded like a completely different guy, And so capturing as much as you can of the people in their comfortable environment is usually the best way to go if you can get it.
I also agree strongly with Tim's notion of wire everybody, Daniel, wire them, and digital technology, storage is cheap. Keep it lit up red all the time. Record your rehearsals, record when you're blocking, record all of that, because I can't tell you how often we've pulled it. So if you're recording everything, it might help get those performances you're looking for.
But that has to come from you to the sound guy, right? So basically, now you are instructing the sound guy, or we are, to say exactly what Cory's just saying, because those little sound bites that you get in between takes and during blocking and rehearsals are gold, right? But a regular location recorder is out there doing his job. He's going to roll when you say action, when he's going to cut when you say cut. So it's just, again, it's a mindset thing.
So with the advent of the new immersive sound technologies, and we've seen several over the last years, from Dolby Atmos to DTSX and Arco RO and now IMAX 12.0 immersion, what has that done to your process as a sound designer and mix engineer? Has it caused you to have to up your game or change things around, or is it business as usual? And then the second question is, as far as distribution in other formats, because there are ancillary things, Blu-ray and features and whatnot, where you got 5.1, 7.1, other formats you still have to adhere to. How has that complicated or helped things?
Those are excellent questions, Michael. It definitely has caused us to up our game. It's just sheer numbers and real estate. We're in production now on Tony Meyer's Beautiful Planet. The score alone for that film is 288 tracks of music. The effects pre-dubs for that are 175. Dialogue is close to 100. So basically you pre-dub everything in the format that you're going to exhibit in. So prior to IMAX Immersive, that was 6 channels of audio. Now it's 12. So everything gets multiplied by 2. So our music pre-dubs are 12 tracks, our effects pre-dubs are 12 tracks, everything is 12 tracks. So we've basically doubled the format. You need to carry all of that audio because you process and pre-dub and pre-pan everything when you go to final. Interestingly, conversely, in cross-platformization, which is happening big time in our industry, mix it once, sell it 19 times. That kind of adapting from track to track has become easier. The technology has really been excellent, and as I mentioned when I was talking, both Bruce Marco and Laura Leans of IMAX have played a key role in organizing some of that on behalf of IMAX, so that we can now go from Atmos to 12.0 rather easily, from 12.0 to Atmos rather easily. The Oro is also a player that is basically a 5.1 on top of a 5.1, so that's not rocket science. Once you have a track, whether it's RO, Atmos, or IMAX Immersive, going down to a 12 to a 6 to a 5, or an Atmos to a 12 to a 5.1 to a 7.1, etc., that's rather easy.
Yeah, it's really important to start with your largest speaker configuration, as opposed to start with like a stereo and bring it up to 12.0. That's not going to work, or not work very well. So coming from 12.0 down to whatever your other deliverables will be, depending on what other formats, how else you sell your film that we have to deliver is definitely the way to go. Well, everything takes a little bit longer. Like we're designing Missions to China 12.0, so there's extra editorial. I mean, there's little incremental things that happen from the time the sound design starts all the way through the pre-mix, through the final mix, just because as Cory mentioned, you're dealing with sheer volume of tracks. So, I mean, you have to give each element its due attention. So it does incrementally add up, because you're also, depending on the subject matter, you're designing tracks now for this extra dimension, which is up. So one of the things I like to do is create some separation and sort of creating the immersive environments, having a different feel in the up as well as on where we're playing and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more time. It's a lot more resources, because obviously the track counts start to go up, deliverables start to go up, and everything's kind of.
I was just going to say that the resources, the real estate is
No, it's more of a time incremental thing, which doesn't really equate to dollars in this case. I mean, we have to deliver 12.0, 6.0, 5.0, 5.1, 7.1 stereo fold downs. Some cases, some distributors require mono on certain elements. And then it depends on whether they're doing a 40 and a 25, because there's usually sometimes some theaters want to play a 20 or a 25 minute version, some theaters want a 40. So that doubles all into those regional codes.
Typically,
You say 12.0, but that's not, we know, they also have 40 presentations, or 25 p.m., so the majority of the still is. We're still talking about a dozen.
they're relatively unchanged. So if you do a 6.0 IMAX track, you probably do a 5.0, which you can do easily within the process of a 6.0 because you take the two singers ensemble, theaters that don't have a voice of God speaker. Typically, then you want stems in that IMAX format, both IMAX formats. So that's obviously notable, sure. Then you want to do 5.1 for broadcast, for DVD, and then you want to do splits in 5.1 for other countries' conversion of those broadcast to DVDs, and then you want to do stereos and splits as those as well. So that's still pretty standard. If we're starting with at the top with 12.0, you got another layer on top.
The workflows have always evolved to sort of allow us to do these down mixes. So we understand that that's part of where we have to get to at the end of the final soundtrack. So we build that into our workflows because there is, it's a little bit more complicated than just hitting a button down convert button. When you some, center upper into center lower, you can't just sort of marry them and go on your merry way because elements will phase. So you got to go in and sort of separate things out, that kind of thing. So yeah, exactly. So you're going through your stems and you're figuring out which stems center upper maybe not be married and stuff like that. So you got to go and spend a little bit of attention on it.
It's a key question, and it's a key question for distributors and producers, and one that we're very conscious of in designing 12.0, because I get calls, early adopters, early on from distributors going, hey, there's no line item for this 12.0 thing that you mentioned as well. It wasn't part of the original budget of the film, but we have a theater who wants it, and so they say, okay, how long would it take to do amazing 12.0 version of this film? And I said, well, we really should open up the mix, get back on the stage for a week, and after with the stems and pre-dubs, and after I pull the phone away from my ear from all the yelling, I go, well, we could do something really cool in half that time in 3 days, and also and then I say, okay, how much time do I have? And a lot of distributors are saying, at this point, because it's new, you've got a day. So you can do something from IMAX 6 to 12 that's quite representative in a day. It's not going to have all the detail as if you spent a week doing it, but it certainly would be noticeably different than the 6-year-old films. And we all, as part of the industry, have a key question because people are concerned with time and cost. And in designing this, we knew going into it, we can't invent a whole other revenue stream with 12.0. It's got to fit somewhere into the logistics of current production. So there are incremental costs, but they're not
But traditionally, you're being contact with that, and I think it's interesting because as a producer, we have our mix, right? We just got to yield some amount of number. Then ultimately, the distributor can come back and say, I'd like some additional things. And then we also have language. Mix the film, and then you get additional requests from the distributor traditionally. And are you traditionally doing versioning, language versioning, requests from the distributor?
Absolutely.
Paraphrase Christian's question.
Sorry. Christian's asking whether or not we get extra requests from distributors after the final mix is complete with the Filmmaker, and do those in fact include language versions? And the answer to that is, pardon me? And who pays? And the answer to that is yes. We do primarily receive requests for small things from a distributor to aid in the process of language versioning. Like we need monos of the dialogue, split from the effects, etc., etc. Most of the time we have that anyway in some format, so it's a simple deadhead pass fold down, not a lot more. And then language versions come online for as many countries as the distributor can sell that film. And everybody's on board for that and rah-rah for that. We want that to happen. We tend to lower our rates for that because we want the film to do well, and it's not as arduous a task. Mixing a language version doesn't take as much time when you've already got the final track mix. And everything as part of the final mix is ready for versioning. We make sure that the things that are questionable, you've got Spanish dialogue, you've got French dialogue, they're split because some territories will want them in, some will want them out. So we're ready to go for versioning when the final film is done. But yes, it is a distributor request and it's paid for by us.
And some of the versioning that we're getting requested that I get right now are theaters that have just upgraded to laser. And they're like, okay, this film you did 2 years ago, can you give me a French version in 12.0? So these sort of requests are sort of coming out. You have to sort of figure out what you can get back, how you can manipulate it. It goes back to what Cory was saying, do I have a day? Do I have 3 days? How far back can I go? I've sort of gotten into the habit when I finish a mix is to stem it out as much as I can internally. So because some of the requests are so different, sometimes we're cutting things down, creating different lengths and stuff. So by doing that, it kind of aids in being able to deliver those 12 O's. Obviously, going forward now, I think the majority of the films that, at least I think that I'm working on, being 12 O's because that's the top format. That all the distributors, they need a little something extra to promote the film, right? And I think 12 O's is something that I can.
So I've got this as a roving mic now. If anybody has a question, okay, so if they're
quick comment to chuck on there is that Dolby Atmos 9111 for home is now becoming a
That's right. Yeah, I just did the Dolby Atmos mix for Journey to Space for home.
That's right.
So a lot of the 5.1 fold downs we used to do for broadcast or for DVD now have to be done and converted into Dolby Atmos as well, which is, as Cory had mentioned, with the technology sort of working together, and now we can sort of cross-platform the two. And so it's a big help. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that was lovely. Butterflies. Yeah. Just for Ryan's point, I've done an Atmos track for Stephen's Rocky Mountain. We're going to do one for Greg's Humpback Whales. When you mix in Atmos, you create two files simultaneously. So you create an MXF file, which is the Dolby Atmos theatrical, and you also have the option to create an Atmos dot file, which is the home theater version. So you mix it once, but you get both. So there's no increment of cost because of the point Brian just made and Paul made. The fold down procedure within that format will fold to whatever the speaker set is in the room, whether it's a big theater or
just to go a little bit further, I think that I just finished doing an Atmos mix on the Sensor UHD release, and I think that this is an area which this market, 93, should be preparing to move into, and when you do that, you're going to want that additional sound part, if you will, a fully immersive soundtrack, whether it ends up, I don't think that, are there any plans to have decoders for 12.0? I haven't heard of any.
No. There's a very conscious effort to not rely on metadata at all in the creation of 12.0. So the demo you heard today were 12 WAV files dedicated to each speaker, and your mix happens and things move definitely from space to space and their spatiality, but it is not a decoder-based system. There is the capability to, there's been talk about decoding decoding internally from a 12 to a 6, and perhaps creating 5.1s. But that's under discussion. The format itself prints as 12 waveforms.
Well, I think producers and distributors should be thinking about how they're going to capitalize on cross-platform UHD. It's going to be a big market.
No, I think that,
Content that people are going to want to see, and it's also going to involve not just in the streaming and VOD, it's also going to go to the big Blu-ray.
I think that's the huge benefit of
And that's
having
where you get
the
the
cross-platform between Dolby Atmos and 12.0 and the vice versa decoding. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Cory, but I think that Dolby Atmos is better set up for home theater and for alternate distribution. So to be able to take a 12.0 mix and maintain all that spatialization in a Dolby Atmos mix, I think is critical. So it's great that they've set that up.
The unpleasant question then is, and I apologize for asking the question, and in fact is, what's the point of doing a 12.0 theatrical mix if Atmos has transformed to enough well and then has to go to home?
I don't think that anyone said that Atmos is the top tier format. As a matter of fact, I think we believe the 12.0 is equal or better. As different brands of everything, you can have opinions, but
from a sound reproduction standpoint, I'm thinking more like producer dollars. If you have transforms that do everything from the Atmos, whether it is best or not, you do have equivalent.
well, it depends on how often. If it's a DMR, IMAX DMR project, you do start there because that's where the original track originates, and that's what they're going to do. Then it comes the way of 12.0, and that requires some adaptation. So if it's an IMAX documentary, chances are it's going to start as a 12.0 track because that's the native format for that medium, and that should stay that way. There's great differentiation in both. There are great things that IMAX 12 can do that Atmos cannot do, and vice versa. To simply state one is better or the other is, which brand of Kleenex do you prefer? It's a very subjective choice, and you can hear differences that are very appealing in formats. So I think it really depends on where the film originates, and I think differentiation as far as having people put their bums in seats is important, and both formats should live.
I have a question about 6.0 versus 12.0. We're in a dome, and IMAX is not intending to put the 12.0 system in domes and stick with the 6.0 system. What are the trade-offs? Why not put a 12.0 in a dome? What am I losing? What am I...
I don't have an answer for you as to why you wouldn't put a 12.0 in a dome. It's certainly more challenging based on the shape, perhaps.
Yeah, I wondered if there was anything physical about the dome.
I would say that's probably the reason architecturally you've got some issues that, you're basically bolting speakers to the ceiling. You need to make sure they don't fall on anyone's head, so perhaps...
Well, there's a screen in the way.
There's that too. That's probably the limitation.
Acoustics and stuff. I mean, I don't know the answer to that either. I can only speculate. But.
I mean, we do talk about the virtues of 12.0, and it sounds fantastic. Certainly would like to help emphasize the immersiveness of the dome, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts or knew anything about that.
Yeah, I think that's a question we'd have to ask members.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we were talking about cross-platformization, et cetera, folks, we do have Bruce Marco in the audience today. Bruce, do you want to comment on any of that while you're here, or should we just leave it as discussed?
I can briefly,
We get a mic. I'm going to get a mic up to Bruce. Ladies and gentlemen, Bruce Marco, head of post-production for IMAX Corporation.
Thank you. So for me, I think that currently right now, Atmos is going to be the near term.
Hang on a second, Mike's coming.
All right.
Thank you. So I think in the near term, right now, for the home format, Atmos is going to be the significant rollout format for immersive audio. Obviously, DTSX is also in there as well. IMAX has no specific thing that we've announced yet or are planning, so to speak, but I think that from a standpoint of what you produce, the Atmos format is important to have as a deliverable element, and I think whether you mix Atmos first or IMAX 12 first and then you go to Atmos, it's important to do both. And I think really it's the trim pass. It's like in our Hollywood movies. They all start with the Atmos mix first, and then we make the IMAX 12.0 and the 6.0 from that. So I think that it's the what we call a trim pass or the adjusted mix between each of these formats is what's critical, because there are differences between them. But you really, to me, if you don't compromise either one. I think that probably, in all honesty, it's easier to start with Atmos and go to IMAX 12 because of the design of the box, but it's not necessary to absolutely do it that way. It can just depend on your mixer and the stage you're using and the format that might be your preferential format. But I would absolutely create, I think as a deliverable element for the documentary films that are made, a lot of the streaming and all these things in ultra high def, they're all going to use the immersive sound formats. So whether it's the Barco or DTSX, actually not Barco in a home, it looks like it's DTSX and Atmos right now. You definitely want to have those tracks. Some of those distributors are actually going to insist on having those tracks for some of those 4K deliverables. I know Netflix is already doing that certainly for Hollywood films, and I would imagine and they do it for all of their original content. All of their original content is produced and finished in 4K with immersive audio moving forward. So I think that's something to keep in mind as you produce these things.
Thank you, Bruce. Are there any other questions? Comments, criticisms?
I have one question. Are there any sound designers or mixers who are
Not any good ones.
Not standing in the front row.
That's right. That was the birth of the formats.
More up there. Yes.
You speak of his voice of God. What's that?
That's the
center top speaker.
I'm just kidding. I come back to this. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I come back to the point of view. If you're doing first person, immersive, yeah, you could probably get away with putting some 4 capsule recorders around with associate producer or craft service person or something like that. But if you're doing third person...
The mics don't work well with peanut butter. I'm just saying.
But if you're doing third person, we need to know, we need to get into that intimacy that cinema brings us as voyeurs to another person's vicarious. We get engaged vicarious. We need a sound guy on location.
Well, I don't think anybody's saying you don't need a sound guy. That's not, and if that's how it came across, I think that's our fault. But I think if you're going to record first person and you have characters and talent, yes, you need a sound guy.
We're just saying don't forget about the environment.
Don't forget about the environment.
Yeah.
But there again, you have the microphone. You still have the ability to discriminate precisely as you do with the camera and lift and lock the scene. So, that voice of God is picking up the airplane. So what post-production tools, what contemporary tools do you have to work with that?
Noise reduction tools are far superior than they ever used to be.
Yeah?
And that.
You're not cheap and so forth?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah. There's some really great suites out there. Isotope puts out a great package.
Yeah, check the demo out for Isotope RX5.
Yeah,
and you'll sort of see.
there's a lot. They can do a lot with noise reduction and taking out unwanted noise, fixing spectral stuff, and all kinds of stuff.
That's great to know. But I also know the value of just having the guy coming to you with dynamics of what is occurring in the scene or visual.
Sure.
If you have that, you'll
Yeah.
We have time time for one more question. Scared.
I would like to make one comment about sitting through storytelling yesterday and what we're talking about audio-wise when it comes to storytelling. I want to give you sort of food for thought, thinking about what we learned many years ago from North of Superior, for example. I mean, the opening of North of Superior, as David showed us with the banging on the podium, was a huge dynamic audio intro to a movie, and that was a great storytelling point. But let's not also forget about that one point in the film that always nails me: huge fire, cut to silence. Silence is incredibly, hugely powerful motivator in your stories. Think about that as you're building your track, as you're building your story. Not to forget about silence. We're sitting in a room where the dynamic range is from 0 to as loud as you want to get. Don't forget the quiet bits, right? And that's just want to sort of leave it with that.
In fact, that reminds me of a funny story. When I was a kid, I was watching Stanley Kubrick's The Shining with some friends. This was on home video, and there was this big build-up where the music was moving to a crescendo, and the kid was on his big wheel and freaking out. And all of a sudden, the music stops, and the word Tuesday comes up on the screen, and my friend screamed. And it was just really funny, because he was known as Tuesday for a long time after that. But that was an example of just stopping the sound completely when you had a build-up for it. So
You sound with your dynamics.
Well, let's thank our panel, Tim Archer, Cory Mandel,